It's May the 31st, 2022, and our reading today in the book of Job is in chapter 21. Then Job replied, "Listen carefully to my words. Let this be the consolation you give me. Bear with me while I speak, and after I have spoken, mock on. Is my complaint directed to man? Why should I not be impatient? Look at me and be astonished. Clap your hand over your mouth. When I think about this, I'm terrified. Trembling seizes my body. Why do the wicked live on, growing old and increasing in power? They see their children established around them, their offspring before their eyes. Their homes are safe and free from fear. The rod of God is not upon them. Their bulls never fail to breed. Their cows calve and do not miscarry. They send forth their children as a flock. Their little ones dance about. They sing to the music of tambourine and harp. They make merry to the sound of the flute. They spend their years in prosperity and go down to the grave in peace. Yet they say to God, 'Leave us alone. We've no desire to know your ways. Who is the Almighty that we should serve him? What would we gain by praying to him?' But their prosperity is not in their own hands. So I stand aloof from the counsel of the wicked. Yet how often is the lamp of the wicked snuffed out? How often does calamity come upon them and the fate God allots in his anger? How often are they like straw before the wind, like chaff swept away by a gale? It is said, God stores up a man's punishment for his sons. Let him repay the man himself, so that he will know it. Let his own eyes see his destruction. Let him drink of the wrath of the Almighty. For what does he care about the family he leaves behind when his allotted months come to an end? Can anyone teach knowledge to God, since he judges even the highest? One man dies in full vigor, completely secure and at ease. His body well nourished, his bones rich with marrow. Another man dies in bitterness of soul, never having enjoyed anything good. Side by side, they lie in the dust, and worms cover them both. I know full well what you're thinking, the schemes by which you would wrong me. You say, 'Where now is the great man's house, the tents where wicked men lived?' Have you never questioned those who travel? Have you paid no regard to their accounts? That the evil man is spared from the day of calamity, that he's delivered from the day of wrath? Who denounces his conduct to his face? Who repays him for what he has done? He is carried to the grave, and watch is kept over his tomb. The soil in the valley is sweet to him. All men follow after him, and a countless throng goes before him. So how can you console me with your nonsense? Nothing is left of your answers but falsehood." Amen. Bad things only happen to bad people, don't they? That's the philosophy, or quite a big part of it, of Zophar and his pals. Many people still think like that. Bad things happen to bad people. Bad things are happening to you. Therefore, what does that say about you? That's basically the line of thinking. I know it seems so crude and simplistic, but like I say, many people still think like that. And that's what these people think about Job now. That's why they're saying what they're saying. And Job calls it a load of nonsense. He actually uses that word right at the end. And so to begin with, and this is generally how it goes between these two groups, the three friends and Job, he basically says in the opening words, well, okay, Please will you shut up for a while? I'm going to make my complaint now. Verse 4. And when he says, is my complaint directed to man, these men in front of him, it's not just that. It is mostly that in this chapter. Of course, we know that Job is also making a complaint against God, because bad things are happening to him right from the beginning. We've been told he's a man who fears God. He's blameless. This is a good man. This is a man of faith. Yet he's suffering just like the wicked should suffer and will suffer in the world to come. But many wicked don't suffer like that in the here and now. And all of this, verse 6, leaves him terrified that the wicked can prosper and have such a good time in this life, but good people like Job can have such a terrible time in this life. He goes on to give evidence for what he's saying, verses 7 to 16. Wicked people are often happy in this life. Verse 7 really sums it up. Why do the wicked live on, growing old and increasing in power? He mentions how it's often the case. Of course, it's not always the case. These are generalizations. This is a bit like the Proverbs, like the book of Proverbs. It's not always the case, but it very often is, that wicked people, their children, are blessed. Verse 8. They go to university. They get good jobs. Often the case. Their homes, verse 9, are safe and free from fear. Well, you think of all the security systems that they have around their mansions and their armed guards. Often these people are free from being punished by God in this life. The end of verse 9. The rod of God is not upon them. Now, they won't escape the ultimate judgment of God, but very often wicked people doing wicked things, they prosper and God doesn't destroy them. And in his wisdom and purposes, that he has a reason for that, and we don't often know why, if ever know why. Even their animals are fruitful in verse 10. Prosperity is the key word here. They spend their years in prosperity, verse 13, and go down to the grave in peace. Many people like this, they even enjoy a good death with their family around them, their riches, their mansions, their prosperity. Yet these people are the wicked. Verse 14, these are the people who've said to God, leave us alone. We've no desire to know your ways. These are the people, verse 15, who cried out, who is the Almighty that we should serve him? Doesn't that sound like Pharaoh back in the time of the Exodus? What would we gain by praying to him? These people are totally defiant and rebellious. They've rejected God. This is what Satan would say against God, because that's who they are. They're Satan's children. But, verse 16, their prosperity is not in their own hands. That's a slightly difficult expression to know exactly what that means. But maybe it's saying, everything they have has been given to them by God. It doesn't belong to them ultimately. So I stand aloof from the counsel of the wicked. I'm not one of those wicked people. I don't think like that. I don't behave like that. But I'm not prospering. And then verses 17 to 26. Picking up on a point that's been made already. These sorts of people are rarely punished by God in this life. Now, we're not saying never, There are notorious examples of mafia bosses who get gunned down, and gangsters in the East End of London who end up uh, going to jail, and serial killers and mass murderers who get hunted down. And yeah, okay. But there are many, many wicked people who do wicked things. And wickedness, by the way, is not just breaking the law of the land, it's breaking the law of God. It's that attitude of defiance and rebellion that's there in verses 14 and 15. Many people live like that, and they have a wonderful time in this life. And prosperity is the word that sums it up. And people like this, they are rarely punished by God in this life. It doesn't quite work like that, does it? So, for example, the questions in verses 17 and 18. How often is the lamp of the wicked snuffed out? Verse 18. How often are they like straw before the wind, like chaff swept away by a gale? Well, the answer is rarely. Rarely does that happen. Rarely do they end up like that. Now, verses 19 to 21 seems to indicate that God's judgment is kind of hovering over them and their families. But it will fall one day. But that's quite a different thing from having it hovering to having it landing. Verses 19 to 21. And that amazing little section, 23 to 26, there are two deaths mentioned there. One man dies in full vigor, his body's well nourished. That's the wicked, the person we've been describing. And he dies well, we might say. And then there's another man, verse 25, he dies in bitterness of soul. Side by side, they lie in the dust, or we might say today, side by side, they're on they're on the same, they're in the same mortuary, on slabs next to each other. But verse 25, the man with bitterness of soul hasn't enjoyed life. That sounds a lot like Job, doesn't it? And I think he's probably thinking that, and he's probably projecting that that's how he'll die as he has lived. And it was the wicked who seemed to have the best life now, and the believer who's in a terrible state. Even in death, the wicked can prosper. Verses 27 to 33. Often the case with their grand funerals. That's what verse 32 is saying. He's carried to the grave, in a great big coffin, I think is the idea. And watch is kept over his tomb, a great big family tomb, a grand funeral, and tremendous popularity, verse 33. This is headline news. There's articles every day for a month about this man in the news, verse 33. The soil in the valley is sweet to him. All men follow after him, and a countless throng goes before him. This mafia boss, this crooked politician, this celebrity, who we find out later was actually a serial abuser and paedophile. But they all turned out for the funeral. There were thousands lining the street, even the funeral, even in death, even at the end. They're getting the accolades of the world. But of course, what's the punchline? Verse 34. So how can you console me with your nonsense? Nothing is left of your answers but falsehood. To say that bad things only happen to bad people. Again, Christopher Ashe sums it up well. Anyone can see that wicked people often prosper and are rarely punished in this life. It is utterly stupid and deeply hurtful to suppose that we can deduce from someone's situation in this age the true state of his or her heart. A bad person may enjoy a good life, and a good person may suffer the pain of a bad life. Only the end will reveal the heart. And if you want to do further reading on that, go and look at the story of the rich man and Lazarus, told by the Lord Jesus in Luke chapter 16.